Live from the Basement of Death studio in multiple locations, remote around southeastern Wisconsin. This is Playin and Slayin. Random Encounter Episode 1. You might be asking yourself, what is a random encounter? Well, let me tell you. Random encounter is when we want to bring you content between our long form episodes. So buckle up, buttercups, because the party has left the town of Epi 60 and is on their way to the great city of 61 show when they are ambushed by a marauding band of gaming multiverse announcements. Then they play a game around the campfire and nurse their wounds. But before we get into that, when you're playing and slaying, it is important to stay hydrated. Welcome to the new short form episode. Josh and Troy, glad to be here with you, broadcasting around the world.
Awesome.
The excitement's all on this side of the table.
I like your table. Speaking of your table, Josh, what are you drinking?
I am drinking an Affy Tapple.
Oh,
Affy Tapple.
I like it.
By Phase 3 Brewing out of Lake Zurich, Illinois. I've been knocking out some beers in the Illinois region. So for our fans and friends and whoever in Illinois, thank you for the good beer.
We should play a game where we pick one of them and you see how close you can get to where they are with the breweries and see if you can find out where they live by triangulating with the brewery selections. And while I creep everyone out about geocaching breweries and finding our listeners, Troy, how about you tell us what we're drinking instead?
I am drinking Cave Ale from Potosi Brewery in Potosi, which is, I don't know, what is that? Little north of Madison, northeast of Madison. I don't remember.
Stevens Point, right?
Yeah, I think it's not quite Stevens Point. I think it's somewhere in between there. So
middle-ish, western.
Middle of central Wisconsin. We'll go with central Wisconsin and think that's in there. So Cave Ale, which is an amber ale. I noticed I had a bunch in my fridge, so I'm like, okay, we gotta work these down. But it's a really good one.
Excellent. I'm going a little bit different. I got the Zoco Vesa Trace Leches. So it's got the stout brewed with chocolate, coffee, pasilla peppers, vanilla, cinnamon, nutmeg, rice, and oats. So it's got, a little bit of everything, but it's like a Mexican hot chocolate stout, and it is delicious. And I'm not drinking it out of the can because I'm not a savage. So I am drinking it out of the BOD.
There you go. There you go.
Given to me by Troy.
That is a great beer. I'm a big fan of that beer.
That is, yeah. You're making me, even though I'm drinking this one, I'm remembering the flavor of that one as you say that.
Such good mouthfeel.
Yeah. It's memorable. That's what it is.
All right. So let's get into the random encounter, this marauding band of gaming multiverse, really news and announcements. It's been quite the week when it comes to gaming and some of the big players in the gaming world. So I think the first one that I want to touch on is D&D Beyond. Character sheets, the reference books. Company originally had been Curse, I think, which then partnered with Twitch, and D&D Beyond was shunted off or sold to Fandom. Fandom owned it for 3 or 4 years, I think, maybe 5 years. And they were acquired by Wizards of the Coast for just shy of, or just over, I'm not exactly sure, $150 million cash acquisition. And I think they're still working out the details of the acquisition. But, a big splash when Wizards of the Coast, so obviously Hasbro, the parent company, but Wizards acquires D&D Beyond, I think makes a lot of sense, when you can circumvent licensing and bring most of the employees in-house and then start to use it for perhaps other games, perhaps other things that they're looking to do with D&D in general. But did you guys happen to see that, or I don't know? Do any of you use D&D Beyond at all for character sheets or
I don't.
archives?
And honestly, for some reason, I had it in my head that this had already happened. So when I when I saw that this happened, I was like, "Oh, okay, I guess I was totally." I thought this happened like 2 years ago. So either I'm living in the future, or yeah, something other craziness is going on in my brain. So I'm like, "Yeah, this makes sense to me."
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a common
Yep.
thought, right? Is a lot of people thought, oh, they're already a part of
Right.
Wizard, because they are really it's ubiquitous, right? It's not like they're
Yep.
doing character sheets and stuff for other game systems. They're explicitly Dungeons and Dragons content. Um, and I mean, I'll be really interested to see what changes, but it gives a
Right.
subscription service to D&D. It'll be interesting to see if they do tie-ins with digital copies of books that you purchase. I think that's one thing that this
Could
opens
enable.
up an
Yep.
opportunity for is
Mhm.
now granted they probably get less money if they do that. I don't know. It's if you're charging a subscription when you purchase the book, maybe if you're a subscribed member, you'll get access to download the book into your collection. I could see
Right.
that happening. I doubt it'll be free.
Right.
It's
Or yeah, reduced price or something else like that.
yeah.
Right. Or some kind of, like you said, either a subscription model or something else to let you get that.
Yeah,
That would kind of make sense.
maybe there's a code in the back or something or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, to redeem or get a
Mhm.
discount. Who knows? I think the other thing I saw some speculation that this does is it actually starts to pave the way a little bit for Wizards and D&D to do their own virtual table.
Hmm.
When you think about
Yep.
the licensing that happens with Foundry and Fantasy Grounds and Roll20, this gives them a way to have kind of a tremendous kind of launching point
Yeah.
for doing something with a virtual tabletop if they so choose. Um, I mean, maybe the next thing we see is they purchase Tailspire or something. Like
Yeah.
they take one of
That's
those
what I
AR
was. That's
tabletops and they bring
Yeah.
D&D Beyond in and as plugins. But
that's
like my
exactly
guess
what I
is
was thinking. Is
that's yeah.
do they reach out to one of those companies to expand that way? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a
And
Roll20 or whatever.
and my guess, right, there was some financial incentive behind this. My guess is they probably knew that this was becoming a very profitable as more and more people kind of moved to online and playing online and stuff, that I'm sure that the bosses either in Wizards or Hasbro, right, said, hey, it feels like we're leaving money on the table. And even though they're investing 150 million, they must believe they're going to get more than that 150 million back, right, by kind of getting more control of that stream all the way from, and like you said, they can probably make some efficiencies with not having to do all the licensing stuff. Again, now they and I think in the past they were trying to probably figure out, was digital actually in their core competencies? It probably wasn't originally, right? That's why they
Yeah.
outsourced it. But now I think they just the way everything's going, it needs to become a core competency, and the way to do it right is acquire a company that they've partnered with and has done it really
Right.
well. So
Right.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, I've dabbled because of having Roll20 and purchasing most of the books in there. I usually don't do D&D Beyond, but like I know when we're playing like our Frostmaiden and that
Yep.
group, Heath uses D&D Beyond for all his character sheets, and there's plugins to Roll20 through that. So I would imagine some of that continues, right? Like
Yep.
that they offer plugins to those other virtual tabletops until they had their own solution, and maybe even then they still do, because licensing is a way to make some
Yeah, and that's what
coin.
I do. I have most of my books like that I bought on D&D Beyond. Like I have a set of most of them there that I bought over the years, whether they have had sales and stuff like that. I didn't do it. Felt like it would be more portable for me to do it there than to buy everything in Roll20. I think I have like the player's guide. I have like a couple of the books in Roll20, but I don't have all the expansions, especially as stuff come on. And I just have, like when we're playing, I have basically a window to D&D Beyond open usually. I have that open, my Google Notes document, and then Roll20, right, to go through. So
What one other interesting note about that acquisition, right, is I did see the financials for 2021 for Wizards of the Coast. Not Hasbro, Wizards of the Coast.
Yep.
Revenue in 2021 was $1.3 billion.
Yeah, so they had 150 million in cash to spend probably too. They probably
Right,
were looking for
right.
ways to reinvest that money, right? So
Yeah.
Yep.
Just huge, like just huge when you talk about market share
Yep.
and the amount of cash on hand. All right, so D&D Beyond acquired by Wizards of the Coast. Let's see what the next encounter that we roll is, and it is Marvel Multiverse role-playing game playtest rules released. So Matt Forbeck, a handful of episodes ago, we had him on to talk about Shotguns and Sorcery, the 5e source book that he worked on with his son Marty, and should be arriving some point later this summer, early fall. But this was his next kind of big project, taking the Marvel multiverse and kind of revamping, creating new, borrowing from some of the stuff that has happened before, to get a rule set in place. And then they released a playtest version. I think it's about 130 pages. So it's not like full RPG book page count, but they're selling it, which is a little different for a playtest. You don't usually get that unless it is the big company like a Marvel, or I think I remember like Cortex Firefly selling a copy of their playtest rules back in the day, and you see it happen sometimes, but it's only $10, and it's available in a couple of different formats. I mean, you can go out on Amazon and buy like a paperback. Roll20 has it, already as like a play set, and Kindle, and I don't think there's like a different PDF option other than Amazon's Kindle. But
I didn't see that.
Or,
I didn't see. My guess is that's just to kind of control. I mean, even though it's only $10, right? Like if you once it gets out in a PDF, it's just going to get out. But I'm sure even the way it is now, it's going to get out, right? In some ways, but I mean, partly if people want to at least support the game, $10 isn't a big ask,
right?
And it is, 120 pages, high quality, right? It could be a finished product. So I think it's kind of in some ways nice that they're kind of saying, hey, we want to get a turn to the crank on this thing, get some feedback, clean it up. I'm sure, like any first rule set, right? There's probably some clarifications and typos and things like that they can go back through and edit, and the best way to do that, right, is to have the crowdsource your proofreading in some ways as good as you do it. I am interested in the I bought it right away as soon as I remembered, because I had again the Matt Forback. I was on his newsletter and he reminded us, and then Ty, you reminded us, and so that made me. Why I was laying on the couch from my phone doing a quick again get the Kindle version down. So
what is interesting too is it's a 3d6 system, and it relies on, like, the best roll you can get is 6-1-6, and that's like the greatest success is if you're able to roll that 13 with a 6, a 1, and a 6. Either of you know the relevance of 6-1-6? Like in the Marvel?
I should, but I'm failing because I don't.
Yeah, same.
So 6-1-6, Earth 6-1-6, was where they kind of, it was the worst performing Earth in the Marvel multiverse. So like there's the idea of Earth 6-1-6 in the bigger multiverse. In every other universe that was like the worst performing, and it's also usually the one that like is centered on is our universe, and that's why the heroes are needed, and that's why all these villains are there, because it is, in the grand scheme of things, it needed the most help. I think, and I might be butchering that story, but that's roughly the idea of that, the relevance of that role. So Matt took that and made that the role that is on 3d6 that's relevant to success and these heroic moments. But it looks like it has some cool archetypes, like ability to make your own characters, stats out some like Spider-Man and others. There's different types like a blaster and like the tech based like an Iron Man. like more of the Hulk, like I think they might be called brutes or bruisers, I forget, but they kind of create these archetypes for like characters and then apply these different skills and your superpowers. I haven't looked too much at like how encounters work or much beyond it, but I think it would be a lot of fun, at least for a like a one shot, and a couple different groups that I play with. I've dabbled with the idea of either running one or playing in one here in the coming days. But yeah, I think it's great for Matt. It's a huge title. I mean, you want to talk about a huge like Marvel. I don't know if there's a universe or a mythos, whatever you want to call it now, that is bigger in our current kind of pop culture movement than Marvel. You're hard pressed to find, and I think it'll draw in a lot of interested people in Marvel to role playing games in general. So I'm also interested to see what the response is like from getting people away from the sword and sorcery of Dungeons and Dragons into a contemporary modern superhero game with the appeal of the Marvel multiverse. I mean, that's just a huge
right. And I'm sure I can't remember in the past when they've been able to line a game up, because now with, Doctor Strange and the where that whole phase of the cinematic universe is really going to be about the multiverse and everything else. Mm-hmm. So I think, I'm sure that was very, very conscious on their part to get the timing right, but I don't remember them ever doing that in the past with some of these other ones that I think, because there was a Margaret Weis version that was, probably 8 years ago, maybe more. Cam
Banks.
Just never really grabbed, I don't think, right? I mean, it did okay, but
Marvel heroic role-playing game or something like that.
Yeah. And, I mean, I think they tried to get some momentum behind it, but it just didn't. And so I think this one though has a little bit more opportunity. Could kind of break through and be a pretty mainstream. So it'll be interesting. It needs to get a really good live stream. That's probably right. That would probably be the other find a good group that could do some. Whatever, a good online celebrity group.
Could you imagine if they got some of their actual A-list actors to play, like, I don't know that would ever happen.
Yeah.
Get the Guardians of the Galaxy or some of the Tom
Avengers
Holland. I feel like Tom Holland would be all about being Spider-Man in a role-playing game.
Yep.
But I don't know.
That'd be cool.
A boy can dream. A boy can dream. So yeah, first, big congratulations to Matt. When I saw that, I was like, oh, that's awesome. When the news broke, and then it actually released here in the last couple of days. I think it was this week, maybe Tuesday.
Yep.
And then I don't know, I didn't see the timeline for the actual release, but I'd imagine they'll gather some feedback, but they probably have a production release, on the heels of this, slated for maybe early next year. I don't know. Or maybe even longer. D&D ran next for 2 years?
Oh, yeah, right? Yeah. We were all like...
When we were like, please save us from 4th edition.
Yeah. Yeah, I do not... I was just doing a quick... I do not see in at least the newsletter that Matt sent out, I didn't see anything about what's the real date for playtest. So I imagine they're giving themselves a little bit of wiggle room, but...
So yeah, Marvel Multiverse role-playing game playtest. The next thing, talk about big budget and gaming kind of colliding. I saw Netflix announced a new show and a mobile game launching at the same time for Exploding Kittens. So a few years ago, I think it was like a $10 million Kickstarter, more than a few years at this point.
2015, I think.
Like 6 or 7 years. The card game was a huge Kickstarter success. And now Netflix has in development a adult animation with, so what's the guy who plays Lucifer? Tom Ellis?
Tom Ellis.
Ellis.
Yeah.
Yep.
Abraham Lim from like The Boys, and then Lucy Liu, and then another voice actress, Ally Mackey, from like Toy Story 4. And so just this kind of A-list voice actors, because I mean, Mike Judge and Greg Daniels are like producing the show. Like it's crazy. Like it's this who's who of voice acting and animation production. Follow the story of like God and the devil come to earth, but they're in cats. That's the whole idea of like the war between cats is, heaven and hell. So to follow the storyline of the game, and then the mobile game, my understanding is that's being released just follows the same classic gameplay, like as the card game itself, but in a mobile version. And I think that's coming in May. I don't know when the show's coming sometime next year, but the mobile game comes in May.
Yeah.
And Netflix has been doing gaming, which is interesting too. Like they're starting to develop some mobile and video game content.
Yeah, it's crazy. And so I just have to take a pause here for a second because Matthew Inman, the Oatmeal, and the website, and at the Oatmeal, he's the one that came up with Exploding Kittens, and I think there was somebody else that came out, but he started just as like a web comic. He's an artist, and kind of went from and it was a webcomic I looked at regularly. I was always on his website, and he's funny. Like he's awesome. To see that come from, 10, 12, 15 years ago, whatever, the Oatmeal, to exploding into what it is today. Like that's just crazy. Like I still think Exploding Kittens has the record for the most backed Kickstarter. Like not number of dollars, but like the most number of people backed. I think it still holds the record.
After initially seeking to raise $10,000 through Kickstarter, Exploding Kittens raised $8.7 million in 30 days from 219,000 backers.
Yeah.
The Netflix press release goes on to say, to date, Exploding Kittens is the #1 most backed project in Kickstarter history and has sold over 18 million copies of the game. That's after crazy. The fact. Started and then they went on to Xbox game designer Elan Lee, and the Oatmeal's founder Matthew Inman.
Yeah, they went on to do like Bears versus Babies and Throw Burrito and You Got Crabs, and they're just like all fun party games,
Mm-hmm.
But just to see a guy go from just drawing and putting it on the web and maybe monetizing a bit to this explosion, I just think it's really, really a cool story. So yeah, I just think, yeah. Anyway, it's fun. It's fun.
It's definitely, it was interesting. I've played. Have you guys played Exploding Kittens?
No,
once or twice. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. I'm going to be the tie in this, where again, all great for them. It's just never grabbed me, and I've actually always been like, really, this is what's making all this money. This is so. I mean, that's where I've always been on it. It's kind of funny. Like the cartoon probably might actually get. It sounds interesting. Like it might grab me, but yeah. So I'm gonna be the tie in this one, where I'm like, really, like Exploding Kittens is getting a thing, but and it's just not. Yeah, I don't know why it's just never grabbed me, but
yeah, I've only played it a handful of times. It was one of those where a friend of Josh and mine from when we were growing up. Had brought it home for like a Christmas or something. Bill had bought it on Kickstarter and played it with him, and I think it appealed to that non-gamer audience as well, and exploded in popularity. So always interesting to me though when big budget studios and things grab a hold of something from our gaming multiverse and bring it forward as a big time production.
Absolutely.
Then the other thing, so what today, actually just this morning, Dungeons and Dragons did their D&D Direct, and it was kind of a live stream preview of the roadmap and what's coming. Unlike Games Workshop, they actually get some quality presenters for D&D Direct and talk a little bit more in depth about what's coming. And they also chose to do this not on April Fool's, and release what most people usually think is an April Fool's joke, and talk about some of their stuff that's coming, unlike Games Workshop with Squats.
I feel like I got to be Ty, and I have to defend.
Yeah.
I have to defend my thing about. I'm
Yeah.
just going to go back to your previous comment about how much the difference in size between a Wizard of the Coast and GW. So
yeah, because Wizards releases better games. I kid. But so they did it was about an hour long. I think the D&D Direct ran. Lots of people were like live streaming it, commenting on it. Ton of like different Twitch presenters and stuff. But I think what's really interesting is obviously the biggest news I would say that came out of it was probably Spelljammer.
Yeah.
So second edition campaign setting Spelljammer, astral plane, spaceships, crazy creatures, just kind of zany, like I don't even want to call it like a fantasy sci-fi hybrid. It's like this weird. Spelljammer is just weird.
Yeah. I mean, it's fantasy. It's fantasy in space. I mean,
Yeah,
true fantasy. I mean, you can argue that GW is fantasy in space, but it's like this is true. Like, yeah, weird. Completely the ideas and the monsters, and it's just really, it's so cool. I think that's why people were trying to figure out how to bring it back, or happy to bring it back, and happy to see GW do it. And that was one that grabbed me. I mean, that was really cool to see that. And then when they showed off all the different races that they had and the creatures, and it's like, well, all right, they're
releasing it in a really cool way too. It's not quite the box sets of old, but it's 3 64-page hardcover books in like a slipcase. So one is like the setting information, one is the monsters like compendium, and then the third is a 12-episode adventure that the creative direction was led by Chris Perkins. They brought in a number of writers for it, and it's 12 episodes, levels like 5 to 8, or I think 5 to 8 are in that range, where it's a condensed, like focused series of adventures. Quality of the books looks good. 64 pages isn't that big, right? Mm-hmm. Like they're, I think a lot of times you'd see that as a soft cover, but it's got a nice fold out map. It's got 3 really beautiful cover art books. So I think it'll do well. I don't know that it'll get played a ton, but I think a lot of people will just buy it to have it from the nostalgia of Spelljammer. And to see like the reception of it for.
Yeah. And I just think as a sandbox, right? I can see definitely where people are going to incorporate it into a campaign, and just, you're as some arc of your adventure. Oh, you're going to be on a Spelljammer and go off in the astral plane, and and I think like you said, it'll probably be a minority of campaigns that are like completely in that setting, but I can definitely see like people taking a bunch of stuff from it, because I think there's just some real cool items that are going to be in there, and that people are going to be incorporate them. So.
Definitely. So Spelljammer is there's a cool like minute-long trailer like release video. So they did some cool like animation. They had some really good presenters. But then the next thing that and I apologize if I'm not going in chronological order of the stream, but talk about campaign settings. They kind of teased a Dragonlance tie-in for an upcoming adventure book. Seems like more similar to what they did with Ravenloft with like Curse of Strahd, where it's like an adventure book versus a campaign setting. And there's going to be a tie-in with like a board game for like like a war game, like tactical combat. And the board game, did you guys see who they got to design that?
No.
Rob Daviau.
Oh, really? Okay. Oh, that's so it has a chance.
So it has a chance to be a really good game. And what it sounds like is because it's around the Dragon War or the War of Dragons, whatever. That some of the larger battles can be fought in the board game and integrated with your campaign. So like when your heroes get to a certain point where the war is taking place, you would play it out in the board game and integrate it back the result into your role playing.
Oh, so now you're gonna get me interested. So do you guys ever play Battle System back in first edition? Yeah, we did again the same. It was the idea of mass combat for D&D, and we had done that in our campaign. Like we built up to this big huge battle and then played it out as using the battle system rules, and then kind of the aftermath of that. So now you got me intrigued, because I was actually a little bit lukewarm, because that was actually the wrap up, where it was the last thing they kind of showed was the Dragonlance thing, and I only watched I watched the recorded version, which was only about a half hour, so I think they cut out a little bit of the chatter around it and just kind of spotlighted the highlights on that. And so I was actually a little disappointed. I don't know what because at first I thought they were talking about, I thought they were going to do like a Dragonlance animated, like a new animated one or something else like that, mostly because the original, because the one that was done was so bad. And so so I think then this is totally me. Like I was totally thought like, oh, that would be really cool. And then when it wasn't that, I was like, oh, what's this, right? And I didn't read all so now I'm a little more intrigued about the board game. And again, they're going to sell a bunch of Dragonlance stuff as long as it's decent, I think. So
yeah, it's. I made a joke, I think, in our show notes that the only setting now that I have left to continue to champion is Dark Sun, and when we're going to get the Dark Sun reboot, because that seems to be the only one I suppose Planescape they haven't really touched either, but
they're getting I mean, what was the other, and then they touched on and I don't have the name of it, the book that's coming out that has the different adventures in it.
So they showcased 2 of the adventures from Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel.
Yeah. I'm excited for that. Yeah.
Yeah, and like they featured the Day of the Dead, the Dia de Muertos themed adventure, and the Caribbean one, and they showcased that a little bit. And that I think is coming sooner. I feel like that's a summer release.
Yep, I think that it's pretty imminent.
And that sounds really fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like
it's 13 adventures that can be just pulled and used elsewhere. And what I think is really great about it, and actually we kind of jokingly referred to Raph a little bit before the show, but when we talked about diversity and inclusion with him, this is the first. I mean, so Candlekeep, they did a really good job of getting representation from women when they did the Candlekeep adventures. All 13 authors of the adventures are people of color, Black, Latino, they're making an effort, a conscious effort at Wizards, I think, to focus on inclusion and diversity in who their authors are. So they have I think not Mercer, Perkins, the other genius DM, is still kind of that creative lead, right? And working with these authors to pull these titles together. But they're really doing a good job of going out and getting a really diverse talent pool.
Yeah, and that representation is key. Seeing some of this stuff too, it's like, oh, that sounds fun. This is cool. Like it's different too. Like it's not so, for lack of a better term, vanilla.
Yeah.
So yeah, that Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel. Then they teased the new D&D starter set. So they'd done, the one with the, what was it, Icewind Peak or something like that, or Stormspire Peak. I forget the name of it.
Stormwreck Isle, I think is what it was called.
Well, yeah,
that's the new one. The old one was Ice. Yeah, Ice. It's right behind me here somewhere. Yeah, it's Ice Peak something with the white Icespire Peak. Yeah. Yep.
With the frost dragon.
Yep.
And before that, Phandelver. Mines of Phandelver was the first starter set. This one, they introduce more digital tools and like a 15-minute learn to play video and integration. I'm sure we'll see something with like D&D Beyond.
Yeah, right. It kind of makes sense right now.
Yeah. Gearing it also to like a younger audience and like a quick play kind of idea. And they're looking at kind of these tiers of play for like, 4th through 6th grade and 7th through 9th, like getting kids into Dungeons and Dragons, which is really cool. And only $19, $19.99.
Yeah.
Like I saw some people whining on Twitter about what that does for other companies trying to do. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. Like it's tough when you put a price point that low as the industry standard, because the production costs and the the return on these isn't great for other companies, but I was like, they need to. Like,
It's
they
a
can't-
loss. I mean, and they can do it. It's a
Yeah.
loss leader, right? They
Yep.
know that people are going to buy that, and again, because it is pretty finite in what it's going to do, right? It's not the complete game. It's not, it is
Yeah.
a one
It's
step
a
in.
quick start rule book,
Right.
an adventure book, soft cover, like comic book style page.
Yep.
5 pre-made characters, a dice set, and
Yep.
there you go.
But it is usually a really great value for that price point. I mean, I know the previous one again was at that same one, and there was so much cool stuff in there, and it's great to have. So
Yeah, Dragons of Stormwreck Isle.
So can I hit my big disappointment? Like,
okay.
sorry,
Yeah.
They got all excited. Like, this is the one thing every DM needs, and you're going to be so excited. And they show me some counters with some sticky things on them. I was sorry, like that one. I was like, really? Yeah. So, like, really?
Yeah.
Come on.
So here's what I will say though, right? Is it all comes back to being able to find a lower cost of entry, because when you are thinking about dungeon masters and needing someone that's going to buy the stuff to run the game, going to buy the adventures, that's going to have the miniatures, this provides an ability to have those tokens and swap them in and out at a significantly lower cost than when you look at the cost of even the WizKids miniatures. Like, the dragons are several $100s. Like, there's this cost to get miniatures to play in some of their other products. So that was the one thing where, yes, it isn't like super cool and awesome for maybe how us as
right,
people of means, disposable income. But if I was a high school student and I wanted to play with my friends, like, that would be great if I didn't have $200 to get a big dragon and I could just get tokens that I could use on a grid paper map. Like, it's creating a lower barrier to enter into the space. And I think with the digital tools, with the campaign case, what you're seeing here with this kind of wave of releases is they're trying to make it even easier to run the game, to get people doing that, because without Dungeon Masters, what does D&D look like, right?
Yep.
So you've got to keep that new people coming in and allow them to. So although I agree, Troy, it's not something where I was blown away and I was like, that's kind of a bummer.
Yeah. Well, I thought, it was a little overblown for what it is. Cause I totally yes, it's hitting there. Although I'm a little bit like it. And again, could be right where we are and what we play, right? Cause we come from the miniature world in some ways, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I'm a little bit like, I'm rather going to be theater of the mind completely. Right. Yeah. Or digital, or if I'm going to be tabletop, right, I'm all in on tabletop. Right. And this is kind of that, because I would never probably be in that middle ground. Right. I would probably just go, we're going to have we're going to have some dry erase markers or whatever. If we're not going to have, we're not going to have any miniatures, or we're going to do something like that. So, but
I mean, I would have my friend Bryce paint dragons secretly and giants to put out when we did our in-person game. Yeah. Okay. So
the one last thing about that. So kind of akin to the Spelljammer stuff, they also sort of teased D&D rule sets for like other universes. So that sounded interesting. Like, I could see that catching on.
Expanding the brand outside, that they could take other IPs like they've done with Magic in that Universe Beyond approach and move things.
That sounded really fun. I'd be interested to see what they do with that.
Let's see. We hit on Spelljammer, Dragonlance, campaign cases. I think the starter set, the Radiant Citadel, they did announce a new streaming show with kind of B. Dave Walters, Megan and Todd Kenrick.
It was like everybody.
Brendan, what's his name? Brendan L. Williams, I think it might be, like Abria Iyengar, the one who did like Exandria Unlimited, just this massive list of people that would be making appearances on the streaming show, and it blew me away, which is really cool. And then I think the last thing that I recall too is they gave us a little more insight into the movie. So we know that this Dungeons and Dragons movie is coming. They set a title, Honor Among Thieves, and showed a logo for the film and a release date, March of 2023. So that's the Chris Pine D&D movie that is supposed to be coming, and they just wrapped shooting, so they've set the release date. It goes into post-production now. But it had been a while since anyone heard other than,
Yep.
oh, there's this movie out there. But Chris Pine and Hugh Grant, Michelle Rodriguez.
Yeah, it looks like a decent list of things. I don't know. I'm not going to hold my breath. I'm hopeful.
Yeah,
I think we've all gotten to that point where we're hopeful. Hopefully it's at least decent.
We got burned by the Marlon Wayans D&D movie of the late 90s or mid 90s. What is cool though is John Francis Daly and Jonathan Goldstein. They did Game Night. I don't know if you guys have seen that one where the couples have their game night, but then like there's a kidnapping or a crime and they're trying to find out what's happening. Kind of a crazy comedy film that was pretty good. So, and it's set in the Forgotten Realms and Sword Coast. So I mean, it's lore and setting that I think a lot of D&D people are familiar with. So we'll see how it does. I'm hopeful. I really hope that this is, a success, because I've always thought D&D could be great for a TV series, for a film franchise, and they always just kind of didn't quite have it. But now I think it's at the point where it's mainstream enough and it's well known enough that you will see at least a relatively big box office draw. Unlike Warhammer Plus, where we hide our content behind a paywall.
Angels of Death.
Oh, sorry.
Angels of Death.
Sorry, yeah.
That's all. Angels of Death.
Oh. I don't know. I don't want to get a subscription to that crony service.
I can't believe you're missing out on the best Blood Angel thing ever. Oh, sorry. Are we still? Oh, we're still talking. Sorry.
Oh yeah. And then the other thing is too. I think they talked about it briefly. They shared no details, but there will be a spin-off television series. I don't think they announced network or where that's going, but set in the world of the film franchise that comes after Honor Among Thieves.
Yep. And then the other thing they touched on was a couple of the video game license stuff, which was the Baldur's Gate 3 and Neverwinter expansion.
The Dragon expansion for Neverwinter. Yeah. But it was worth watching. There's plenty of write-ups too. But some of the videos is really good. Some of the commentary was interesting. It was a cool program to kind of see them. They've done like the D&D live stuff in the past, but this I think was the first one that they called Direct, and the idea was this was like a direct to the fans. Here's what's coming.
Yeah, I thought this is again, and I think like I said, I watched the recorded version after, and they edited down, I think, the hour-long stream to about 28 minutes, and so it's really consumable, and you get all the highlights, and even that I fast-forwarded through the things I didn't I didn't care about, and so it was easy at 20 minutes to kind of get through. I was doing some other stuff, so.
Yeah. Very cool. So that, I think, is the random encounters. And then we want to talk, we're not going to do a full game review. We're going to keep it short, but we got together and played not a new game per se, but a new game to us. Took it out of the shrink wrap and unboxed it, which is always a fun part of playing, and then learn the rules together. The Ancient World game, Red Raven Games, Ryan Laukat does everything. Art, story, game design, layout, rules, right? I mean, it's like a one man band. I'm sure he has a number of people that work and do stuff for him, but he has a tendency to really have his fingerprints all over the projects there at Red Raven, his company. And I don't want to talk too much about it. I'd like to hear from you guys, but general concept is you are an empire. You're a civilization that is trying to build out and expand, defending yourself from these titans that appear in the world to wreak havoc, and you have to kind of balance your expansion and your military and your resources to be able to effectively hold them at bay, while still also taking actions to improve your scoring, collecting these banners for your civilization to score out for victory points at the end. But I mean, what would Euro style action placement, resource management. Not really a
Yeah.
deck builder, but a tableau builder.
Resource collection too, a bit. Yeah, like and almost a tiny bit screw your neighbor with certain cards come out, and if you play first or play last, can kind of determine, like, the person that plays first really needs military, and a great military card comes out, they have first dibs. So
yeah, I mean it's that limited interaction you get from those Euro style games, right? Where it's more about blocking versus like direct attacks or stealing from. It's kind of manipulating the turn order and the action spaces to interact. I think the one thing that we didn't really do, but could be interesting in effect gameplay, is if you sniped your opponent's Titans. So like if you had gone out and taken that from them, because I think there's some pretty significant victory points when you look at like what the Titans allow you to accumulate, especially late game.
Yeah. Although, I mean, as we were trying, again, it was early play on it, right? But then we were just trying to, because you had to, right? Except for the first turn, right? You always had this Titan that you had to deal with at some point during your turn, and you have this worker placement, limited resources kind of thing. So you're always trying to like plan your strategy. Like, okay, I got to make sure I have enough left that I can take out my Titan to do that. So yeah, it would be interesting. Yeah, that balance between, because if you take somebody's Titan out, they're not getting the reward, but now they also have resources that they can spend to do other things, right? There's so many interesting kind of trade-offs, and it was really hard to. I think it was also hard to tell like who's really like it was all pretty tight, right? I think in the end, all our points ended up being really, really tight, but you couldn't really. It was hard to tell a little bit. I think we could tell a little bit like who was doing well and not. But
even though the banners are public information, right? Like you see what people are accumulating, but it's very hard to decipher. There's no scoring track. Right. There's no real idea, and you're taking roughly the same number of actions and turns.
Right.
So even though it's not hidden information, it was difficult to kind of be like, all right, what's Troy doing over there? What's Josh doing over here?
Yeah,
I mean, Ty and I definitely thought Troy was winning. Like, I don't know, halfway through the game, he was sort of running away with it, and we're like, oh yeah, he's got this in the bag. And then when scoring came out at the end, it was a lot closer than I anticipated.
Well, it came down to a tiebreaker for you two.
Yep,
that's right. Yeah,
your banner totals on victory points were the same, and then it came down to like coins or whatever the tiebreaker was.
Yep. Yeah.
And you weren't too far off either. Like you were right behind us. So
I was closer than I thought I was. I struggled there at the end. I couldn't kill my last Titan.
Yeah. And I think Josh, where you're I don't want to call it a makeup mechanic, but you late in game there were some multipliers and bonus cards that you ended up playing that kind of pulled you tight, where I didn't I didn't have advantage or the ability to grab those. Because and that's what kind of really tightened things up, because I ended up with not a lot of bonuses as it worked out. So and interesting around somehow again as you dissect it, right? Like even there was ways, like you have so many workers, but there was ways to get extra workers, but it actually almost didn't feel like extra workers were that big of an advantage. Like it wasn't like there's some games like Lords of Waterdeep, right? Getting that extra action really seems like it gives you a huge advantage.
Yeah, well,
in this it didn't.
You got to feed them.
Right. Yeah. Right. There was balancing mechanics, and then and even then there was a lot, especially late game, right, where like we would like you weren't there was actions you kind of saved for the end just to kind of like, oh, I'm gonna clean up this or get heal, so you could heal your lands and things like that. Not to buy. So it didn't feel it's like the actions were definitely minimal and you wanted to conserve them, but it wasn't that wasn't the tightness. It was almost the actual resources you were trying to get was the real thing that was limiting across. So interesting game, lots of real good interactions. And
I think like so we played Imperium at the Weekender, the card game Building Empires, which is one I definitely want to like play again, because I think like that game, this one is another one that there's multiple tracks to victory or to success, if not victory, that I want to like play it again. What about you guys? We're not going to do like a play it or slay it, but is this one you'd bring back to the table? I think the next playthrough will also be significantly like quicker, right?
Right. Yeah, I would like to play it again. So you're talking about the extra workers. I didn't take any extra workers, so I had the original 3. You guys both had, I think, 5, right, at the end.
I think
Yeah.
so.
So and yeah, having like kind of to your point, like having done it that way, I'd like to try to play it again, getting the 5
Well,
workers and see how
yeah.
that changes the game for me.
Yeah, I mean, I always had to use one of them to generate the ambrosia, so the nectar of the gods that you could use for other actions and things to either get another action or to feed them, because I didn't have enough in my empire row, like the districts or the locations, to support my population. So I was always like trying to scrape together enough to feed them so I wouldn't lose the points or fall behind if they became starving workers, because I don't want to be that kind of emperor. I'm kind and benevolent.
Yeah, and I
feed my people.
I liked it a lot. It was good. It was interesting. You brought over Lost Ruins of Arnak also that night as the 2, and there's a lot of parallels between them, I think. But I think the Ryan Laukat, the gameplay here is more elegant. Like there's similarities in it, but the way he does some of the things we've talked about and these subtle kind of balance factors and things like that, I think the gameplay of Ancient World is more elegant. I like the theming in Lost Ruins of Arnak a little better, and it's completely different. Like the artwork here is great too, but I like I can kind of buy into the theme of Lost Ruins of Arnak. You're definitely adventurers and going through and some of that on there. So they're similar, but kind of scratching 2 different things on some of that. And I do like them both more than Imperium yet. Again, I think maybe it's just because Imperium's just a card game. Like there's this again has a lot more visual appeal. It feels like.
Yeah, I mean Imperium's just a deck builder, but not just a deck builder.
There's a lot going on for a deck builder.
There's a lot of complexity. Yeah. Yeah, I really like Imperium. I like all the games we mentioned: Imperium, Lost Ruins of Arnak, Ancient World. When we think Ancient World, what made me draw the comparison to Imperium is empire building, right? Civilization building. That idea of what you're trying to do, warfare, feeding your people, like creating an engine to run to make your civilization better than your neighbor. But
yeah, so definitely good. And an older, like you said, it's an older game. I think it released in 2014 when I was looking at it here. So I didn't realize it was even that old.
This was the second edition.
Second edition, okay, which came out later.
Which was new at the last Gen Con that I went to. So 2019, I think, is where he had released the second edition. And that had like we had the blocks instead of the cardboard tokens, and like the coins, the ambrosia was plastic instead of like cardboard. So
yep, that'll always get components will always get me too. So yeah, you having the upgraded components is pretty cool.
That was The Ancient World by Ryan Laukat and Red Raven Games. And I think, unlike most episodes where then we go tell you what we're hobbying and what we're kickstarting and reading, this is Random Encounter, and that does it for us. So we will enjoy any feedback, but hopefully everyone enjoys the shorter format. We'll be back in a few weeks with a full episode, and then we plan on mixing these in as things come up. We might focus on hobby for one of them. We might focus on the upcoming Weekender for one of them. Who knows what we'll do? But we'll try to keep it contemporary and fresh topics, a little different than the usual banter in future Random Encounters. Any final thoughts, Josh or Troy?
No, it was good. It was good to chat. Lots of exciting things going on, and that's why we wanted to get these things out here a little more timely. So awesome. Always happy to chat with you two guys. This is, again, it's not much different than what we would do normally when we get together. We just happen to roll the cameras and turn the mics on. So
yeah. All right. Well, as usual, I won't go through the full spiel because if you're listening to us, you know where to find us. But hit us up on Twitter at Playin Slayin Show. Send us emails. Drop some comments on the website or wherever you may download and listen. And in the meantime, keep the dice rolling, the drinks on ice, and no matter what, keep playing and slaying. By Mortarian's wings, this is Random Encounter number 1. I don't like that narrator voice. Wait, I got one more. Hey guys, what's going on? You left me outside the tower. Let me in. Where's that? Come on.
I can't hear you.